Our final panel discussion today is on messaging and the future of CX. So, Mr. Yashas Prasad will be hosting this segment, joined by his guests, Mr. Mohit Rati, Mr. Hussain Kesuri, Mr. Somil Mehta, and Ms. Vashima Goel. A customary round of introductions before we begin. Our host Yashas leads the commercial business for India and SAARC at Zendesk. He's passionate about driving business growth and helping customers succeed. His guest, Mr. Mohit Rati, heads the acquisitions and marketing for Porter. During his 5.5 years with Porter, Mr. Rati has played a pivotal role in making Porter a prominent intra-city logistics player. I would request everybody to keep their lines on mute to minimize any interruptions. Next, we have Mr. Hussain Kesuri. Our next panel guest is the Chief Category Officer at Pepperfry, responsible for the complete category and merchandising operations. During his 8 years at Pepperfry, he has been instrumental in building home categories, including the launch of the omni-channel business, franchisee model, and alliances portfolio at Pepperfry. Mr. Somil Mehta joins us from the Kraft Heinz Company as the country manager for India and Southeast Asia. Having worked with many iconic brands globally and locally like PepsiCo, Samsung, Pidilite, Crumpton, Somil has experience in over two-thirds of the consumer product categories in the world. And our final guest at today's panel discussion is Ms. Vashma Goel, where she serves as Amazon's India head, perfect order experience. Her role entails ensuring that products sold in Amazon India are perfect quality, thereby giving a perfect experience to customers. So we have a great lineup here today. So I'd like to welcome Yashas to kick off the panel discussion. So you have the stage for the next 30 minutes. Thank you. Mr. Prasad, are you online?
I'm so sorry. I think we are in a phase of life where unmute me or probably I'm on mute has become the new normal of how we speak. However, my sincere apologies on that. And just kickstarting the panel discussion, guys. First of all, thank you so much for sparing time, for taking out time and being a part of this exciting panel discussion. And trust me, we have super rich experienced people on this panel discussion, and thank you so much to our esteemed panelists as well. Right, unfortunately, Mr. Hussain could not be a part of this panel discussion due to an emergency, but I'm happy to have this conversation with the rest of the team. Right, so we did have the CX trends report, okay, that Neha was referring to, and in fact super insightful. And the topic for this panel discussion today is around messaging and the future of CX. And definitely needless to say, right? Okay, how important is messaging? How important is the future of CX? Because today all of us are living in a world where we used to speak about AD and BC till now, but now we only speak about pre-COVID and post-COVID, right? So it's a new normal of the way we speak and we interact with our fellow colleagues and friends and family, right? So with that context in mind, I would want to probably have the first question to Mr. Somil. Hey, Somil, how are you? Somil, you're on mute.
Hi. So I was just testing my so I'm on mute. Okay, fine. I think now I'm audible properly. Yeah.
No worries.
Right.
So, Somil, one question that I had for you, right, is as more and more customers rely on digital experiences today, their expectations are completely raising every single day. And businesses aren't getting a pandemic pass any longer, unfortunately. So you have to keep up and go ahead, right? So what have you done to ease the burden on your agents, or probably how do you help your customers to get support easier and faster? Have you incorporated any empathy training or digital initiatives into your customer experience?
Right. So, my a large chunk of my career has been in FMCG and FMCD industry. It's purely consumer product industry, and consumer product industry, unfortunately, pre-pandemic had especially FMCG and something which I have worked really extensively is packaged food and beverages. This product categories had pretty low salience on e-commerce as a channel first of all. Well, that salience has grown exponentially for consumer products overall, but for FMCG, it still remains lower compared to other categories like say consumer durables, mobile phones, accessories, furnitures, and entire gamut of services. Services have, I mean, pretty much now, for all we know, has moved completely on having digital interface and digital experiences, and that's where every service industry or service provider is trying to enhance the ease of operations and experience to the consumer. So that's one of the dichotomy, or that's one of the, I would say, disparity where our product industry that I am a part of also goes through. However, so what is very critical is that in physical product, when you have to deliver a physical product right to the end consumer, now it can be through any channel, it can be through a next door retail store or a modern trade store like a big bazaar, or maybe through an e-commerce channel. The challenge is that physical delivery and from the factory till the end of the consumer, and there are multiple intermediaries in between. The number of intermediaries can vary depending on channel to channel, and so our effort in terms of enhancing the digital experience to the customer does not is not limited only to the end consumer. We have to actually enhance the experience for every channel intermediary. You can call them distributors, channel partners, agents, whatever you call, or retailers, but we have to actually encompass all of these channel partners in end-to-end automation and help them enhance their experiences with every transaction that they do with us. So, what is essentially consumer industry as a part of the consumer industry we have been doing since ages, and we are evolving on that front pretty rapidly. With or even without pandemic, is we are easing the burden on channel partners by doing end-to-end automation. That is, we automate the entire selling ecosystem so that every piece, every unit sold in the country anywhere is captured automatically on a real-time basis that add back in your system as a liquidation of an inventory, and then it keeps on building on your product forecast on a real-time basis to the factories. Any anomaly over like a 2 3 day or a week can get captured easily because of this kind of an end-to-end automation. And rather than waiting for the full month numbers to roll in, you can actually look at daily or a weekly tweak to your forecast, and then your factories and everyone can plan it accordingly. Even once automated, our customers also get replenishment of the product automatically as per the preset frequency. This also helps customers manage optimum stock levels because freshness of the assortment is super critical for packaged F&B. In terms of empathy specific to this entire automation effort, this entire digitization effort is actually the base of that is empathy, because just imagine you are transacting on a physical basis crores of units of products every month. It runs into crores and billions of transactions that happens every month, and your entire ecosystem has to be on their toe managing the transaction.
Yeah.
It's a hugely stressed environment. Now, the more you automate most of the processes, rather than ad hocism, you actually create a huge pile of data that gives you meaningful analysis, meaningful understanding. And firstly, your discussion at every value point is basis that data, first of all, and not ad hocism. When you discuss on ad hocism, there is always a stress. When you discuss on data, stress is not there. That's one part of the empathy. And the other part of the empathy is that you enable everyone involved in the value chain to improve their productivity with the automation, and their stress levels also goes down because of this entire automation. Since FMCG is more transactional in nature versus other categories like durables, etc., it is critical that our CX initiatives, as I said, encompass this entire ecosystem of value, everyone in the value chain, to reduce their stress in terms of right availability of the right assortment at the right time, ease of the entire selling process till the last mile, till the last consumer, develop good amount of analytics in between through every sales transactions, and even automate other aspects, commercial aspects like say maybe claim settlement. I think this is how the end to end, I would say, the entire value chain automation is something which consumer goods industry, as I'm part of consumer goods industry, we are working on, we are enhancing that, and that's how we are supporting our entire ecosystem. And that's the basis of that entire thing is empathy actually.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Samuel. I can definitely relate to whatever you said, right? And echo your sentiments, especially around empathy, because we at Zendesk, the foundation for everything is empathy. And in fact, COVID has taught every single organization, right? Okay, to one lesson, that is go digital, right? Because we don't know how the future is looking like, what's going to happen tomorrow. And it is important for every single organization to go digital so that there is a seamless engagement that you can have with your customers, right? And on the same lines, right, I also remember interacting with one of the leading FMCG brands in India, okay, who leverage Zendesk. And one of the key things that they have also developed is how effectively they can have a seamless conversation with their customers, okay, via WhatsApp as a channel, right? So messaging is something that is definitely extending, and which is at par with any other platform, any other channel, I can say. But your thoughts were extremely insightful. Thank you so much. Right. Moving on. Mohit, I have a quick question to you, okay? And especially you are one of the leaders with respect to the logistics industry, right? Okay, and especially pandemic has taught a lot of lessons to each one of us. So late last year, we actually talked about a lot of high performing companies and CX champions. And the champions see CX as a most strategic investment, right? Because you're a leader in CX, have you noticed your customer base growing? And if so, how have you recognized the return on investment of a good customer experience strategy? And what is the most impactful investment according to you?
Right. Thanks, Jesus. Good to be here. Have been listening in all the insightful conversations and have been learning a lot. So thanks, Nitin, for inviting me here. Uh, Yes. So, as you rightly said, I think we as a company have always been very obsessed with the customer experience piece of it. And ours is a two-sided platform. So, we have on the one side partners who accept the trips, and on the other side, who are SME customers or people like you and me who are booking trucks to, let's say, move their house or move the goods in general, right? So, we have these, I mean, both the personas on our platform. And when the pandemic hit us, I think it was a very difficult time. And then I mean, at that time, we thought that probably will degrow this year. But I think after that, we saw a V-shaped kind of a recovery. We were surprised by the recovery that we had. And to be honest, I think we will grow in triple digits this year as well as compared to the last year. And I think a lot of it has happened because of our obsession with the the customer experience part of it. As in, so I can give you a couple of examples as well from internally. So we started something called as we have always been little customer focused, but we started some sort of an initiative inside called a think tank initiative, wherein people from various teams came in together and we started closely listening to the customers, what they're trying to say, what are the need of the hour, etc. So let's say, I mean, you would remember sometime in April and May, a lot of labor migration was happening. You would remember that all the TV news channels, etc., were broadcasting that, and a lot of labor migration is happening. And we realized that for a lot of our customers, this would be a challenge because there would be no labor and loading unloading would become a challenge there. So we started a new help category on our platform called helper category, wherein the driver or in our case our partner will help you with that. Similarly, we also realized that the ticket size has gone down because nobody really had a lot of cash at that time. So people were just buying really small quantities basically. So a lot of movement had started happening via two-wheelers, etc. So we launched another category which is two-wheeler, and all of these things, and we did few of the other things on by really segmenting our customers and being able to come up with very sharp focused offerings for them. So all it's the result of all of that that we have been able to, as I said, grow by a triple digits this year. If you will ask me that what has been our most impactful investment, it would probably sound little cliched when I say this, but one of our most prominent investment honestly has been just going back to the basics and just listening our customers really better. I think sometimes when you're growing very fast, you sometimes tend not to listen to them, but when something like this happens, then you don't really have a lot of option but to start really listening and try and find other avenues of growth. And once you do that, you realize that there are actually a lot of insights which are available. So I think probably the most impactful investment for us has been just listening probably more closely to our customers.
Absolutely, I completely relate to you, relate with you, Mohit. In fact, listening to your customers, right? In fact, one key observation that I've seen, right, is previously, okay, the way in which your customers would probably reach out to you is probably through a telephone or through an email, right? But today, with the number of channels that are increasing, right, okay, they want you to be there at every single point where they are there. Right, may it be a social media, may it be a telephonic conversation, or for example, if I probably want to book a logistics, I just go into my mobile phone and I start interacting with you. And that is the seamless transition that's happening between what we were doing previously and what we are currently doing. Very, very insightful, Mohit, and completely echo with whatever you said. Thank you so much on that. Right. So moving on, we have Vashima out here, okay, who comes with immense experience, especially in CX in her previous organizations and also leading Amazon in her current stint. Vashima, a quick question to you, right? According to our CX trends data, okay, that was briefed by Neha a few minutes before, what we see is companies with messaging have faster resolution times, and the satisfaction criteria is also very higher, right? And D2C sectors, like especially in the e-commerce and gaming, are leading this effort. What is your messaging strategy? Have you seen any surge in volume? Wanted to understand more thoughts on the same from you.
Sure. Thank you, Yashas. And, on messaging strategy, messaging strategy is more like a tip of an iceberg. What company needs to understand it, what is the entire iceberg above the water and below the water. And I'll probably, Mohit is here and I'll take example of Porter. I used Porter last year in Bangalore, and the app was such a easy, breezy, wonderful app to use that I did not even had to reach out to customer care. I did not had to use any self-service. So this is where, most e-commerce companies are, and this is a message that, I would want to pass to the larger audience here, is that have your experience, the product that you're selling to the customer, it could be services, it could be a FMCG product, make the experience so delightful that the customer doesn't need to come back to the organization itself. So I was wrapping up my house in Bangalore and I wanted to use a service, the whole pandemic hit, and I evaluated a lot of options. I was not in Bangalore, I was, managing all this remotely. And I chose Porter because the experience was very seamless there. I did not need to contact any customer service. So to me, the best messaging scenario is where there is no messaging, where the customer does not want to reach out to the customer. So when you're looking at any strategy, look at the bigger picture. How can you eliminate the option that the customer has to reach out to the customer, to the company itself? And I will quote, example, from my Flipkart days, initially when e-commerce was still kind of coming in the industry. So, Flipkart realized that the biggest contributor to the reason when customers was coming was, where is my item? There was anxiety when you buy a product. Hey, is this not a fraud? Is it a genuine company? Will the product be delivered to me? Is it 2 days? Is it 10 days? So what Flipkart did, they identified initial days, 10 years back, you would order something, you would wait for email or a courier to come in 10 days. There was a whole black window. To some extent, it still exists with speed post or, government organizations. So think of the journey from 5 years back where you ordered from Flipkart and you had a 4-day dead window. You wouldn't know where your product is, or you would get random SMS. But now, as soon as you ship a product, you know which seller it is from, which city it is from, which warehouse it is going, how is the entire journey. So the messaging has been converted into anticipating your customer needs, focusing on, and there are multiple ways to identify that. You can look at your contact center data, identify which are your bigger problems, try to solve for that. Now, this is something which most companies are doing. And you can only get so much more better. It's only how much mileage can you get by looking at your existing data. What the bigger picture is to understand voice of the customer. So, there is an Oppenheimer strategy, I'm forgetting the exact name of this law. So back in World War II phase, the US government, the Allied forces, they wanted to identify, how do you want to model your airplanes? So they wanted, because if you have a heavier plane, which means it's safer, but it means it takes more fuel. So they wanted to identify which parts of airplane to safeguard against, for potential failures and loss of pilots. And the strategy applied was that you look at the planes which has the maximum on the surface area where the maximum bullet holes were and fortify that area. But what exactly was identified is that the planes that did not come back were the planes. So these were the planes that who actually came back, but they fortified the plane that did not had less bullet holes, because it meant that these were the planes that went down. So it is looking at below the tip of the iceberg, what is missing. So a lot of times most company gets wrapped at just looking at their data, identifying what their current customer experience or contact center data is saying. So companies needs to invest in identifying what the customer wants, looking at an outside inside approach, like doing NPS surveys. I'm a big supporter for NPS surveys, or understanding what the customer is saying. A lot of times owners of department within organizations, they get wrapped in their own myopic view, forgetting what the larger customer wants. So reaching out to customers through, it could be your market research studies, it could be NPS, and obviously your contact center data, but supplementing it with other outside in view, and then identifying where the problem is, and then working towards solving for that problem. A lot of time what I see, contact center organizations, they try to find a solve within their own self. They don't reach out to the larger business, larger company to identify, to solve for that problem. Like in back in those Flipkart days, 30 to 40% of the calls were, hey, where is my order? Now the typical solution would be, have a quick answer within 2 minutes, an SMS going that you will get this product in 4 days, 5 days, or a very smartly trained agent answering your call. So this is a very tip of the iceberg kind of solution. The bottom solution is that having the supply chain visible to the customer, so that there's no anxiety. The customer doesn't has to reach out to you for that answer. So that is one part of the question that you answered. What is the messaging strategy should be? So the messaging strategy should be to identifying root causes why the customer is coming to you, and then providing solution to them even before they come to you. Now, if any case they do come to you, so how the industry is evolving is, earlier it used to be one solution fits all. Then currently it is more about personas, or creating responses which suit to certain cohorts of customers. The future of messaging is, or reaching out to customer, it's about individualized customization. It's about identifying what your customer wants and then responding in that format to him. Like for example, younger customers, your millennials, they don't want to have any physical contact, be it voice or emails with the customer. So devising self-service strategy for them. But let's say an older customers who are typically 40 or 45 years old, they want that comfort of speaking to someone and getting validating that information. So identifying what is your customer, personalizing that information, like, hey, this is a millennial and he buys tech products. So identifying what he wants and creating that messaging style for him, or understanding that, hey, X customers is very anxious. Anytime they buy, they reach out to us. So creating messaging information, understanding the customer needs. What is the trigger point that the customer wants, and then providing information, proactively preempting, understanding their needs. So, it could be any messaging channel. It could be phone, chat, email, WhatsApp, but it has to suit the needs of the customer.
I completely agree with you, Washima. In fact, you touched upon multiple topics, right? Okay, number one, it's important to look at the bigger picture rather than probably focusing on one single item and seeing how exactly we can solve that. That is point number one. You also spoke about how exactly the mindset is for various generations. Millennials expect a different way of customer experience, whereas probably a person who is 70 years old expects a different way of personal experience, right? Third thing that you importantly touched upon is how about being proactive rather than being reactive, right? Where instead of me reaching out to them, how would it be if the companies themselves reached out to their customers to probably give all the information, right? It is phenomenal to definitely understand all of these from you, Washima, and super insights over there, right? Just being cognizant of the time, Nisha, do we have more time, or wanted to seek your guidance over there?
I think you can have another round of questions and then we can wrap up, Yashas, if that's okay.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nisha. And just moving on, right? Soman, probably I'm just curious to ask you this question. CX leaders cite the ability to adopt to the evolving needs of customers as the biggest pain point in 2020 and the highest priority going forward. So what we have seen is CX is absolutely important for every single organization and has become the highest priority. Do you agree with this? And if not, what was your biggest pain point? And how did you overcome any challenges that you actually came across?
So I don't think consumer needs have only evolved in 2020. Actually, when you say that consumer needs have evolved in 2020, you are actually softening the blow. The needs have just accelerated with the pandemic being the catalyst. So the acceleration has been the pain point and not the evolution per se. In fact, we all were gearing for evolution and not for accelerated evolution. I'll put it that way. Our biggest pain point has been similar to most players in the consumer good industry, which is supply chain disruption because of the pandemic, and especially if you have your sourcing skewed in certain directions, then and if you don't have a backup plan, then only God could have helped you during those days. And being in a packaged food and beverage industry, we saw huge uptick in demand as consumers upstocked initially. Also, consumers were looking for known brands versus local products, which is where packaged foods and beverages, play a big role. However, our products are also so that is one end where we see the uptick. I'm addressing the volatility bit. The other end is that our products also service the food service and hospitality industry, which was completely shut. The reality is that you have a different packaging format serving both the demand points, and that goes completely for a toss because of the lockdown, because of the pandemic. Now your packaging supplier were already impacted by the lockdown, so to ask one demand points packaging supplier to ramp up the business suddenly, you can ask the other guy not to supply because that's not a demand, but to ask this guy to ramp it up suddenly is also something, especially if you are skewed on certain suppliers, not going to happen. So this made us actually wonder that while we want accelerated growth with or without pandemic, our supply chains are more attuned for steady state of growth. That was a dichotomy that hit us hard to be personally hit me really hard. That I mean, even without the pandemic, I wanted to grow accelerated, but I could not have done that because my supply chain is not geared for that. So how we overcome this challenge? Well, there is hardly that we could do in short run, to be honest. It's not a server that if you upgrade it and suddenly from a laptop transaction date starts managing crore transactions from tomorrow. Yeah, it's not a server that just upgraded thing and enhance the internet bandwidth and maybe you are done. It's not that. The physicality of the task makes it really impossible to tweak things in the short run. However, for the long run, we are working on crunching our forecasting analytics. That is, we are now bringing in nuances on a real-time basis and not, and obviously with the interface, with the technological interface and interventions, and we are not waiting for quarterly reports. So this is done by, as I mentioned in my earlier response as well, we are automating end-to-end selling process, which throws real-time anomalies or trends on consumer demands and helps us tweak our supply chain accordingly. We're also creating smart hedges on our sourcing options. We are not letting ourselves now skewed in one direction. We are creating multiple options there as well. In fact, what we are now realizing is, and this is something which is very critical for all of us who aspire to deliver superior CX with the passage of time. But the next level of CX is actually not coming only from putting efforts on the CX front. It is actually going to also come from integrating your efforts towards what I call as VX, that is enhancing your vendor's experience, so that they are also adequately passionate and invested in evolving your CX journey.
Absolutely, Somal. Okay, absolutely. In fact, the vendor experience is something that is becoming super, super crucial, especially in these challenging times. Thank you so much for that, Somal. Moving on, Mohit, a quick question to you. Over the past year, especially considering the COVID, right, there's been a lot of changes, especially changes in our working environments changed significantly, right? There were layoffs. Okay, we were all asked to work from home. All of a sudden, remote support challenges in many cases, and so on and so forth. So, what do you think your agents are they well situated now to support your customers from wherever they are? And how about your managers? Do they have the right tools in place to probably monitor how the performance is, how the customer experience is, and so on? So, what are your thoughts on that, Mohit?
Sure, yes. So before I answer that, I mean, just wanted to thank Washima for her generosity with the praise that she heaped on our services, etc. I mean, Always a delight to hear a happy customer, and it means a lot coming from somebody who heads the experience at Amazon, because I mean, Amazon is the epitome of the customer experience. So thanks, Washima, really appreciate it. So to answer the question, Yeshas, while we uh, so when the pandemic started, honestly, we I think when during the March itself, when we had those first signs of 10, 15, 20 cases creeping in, I think our CEO being a little, I think he went into a little hyper kind of a mode. I mean, probably had that kind of a foresight that, hey, it's not really going to work out fine, and India is going to go under a lockdown or something like. He anticipated not this long kind of a lockdown, etc., but he anticipated something of that sort would happen. So right in, I think we got that piece a little bit right, in the sense that we started working on moving or enabling work from home for most of our agents right in the March itself. So I remember, I think in the first week of March, we started that mandate that let's ensure that all people are able to work from home. And one of the key challenges in doing that was, while all of us had laptops, etc., and it was pretty easy for us, the real challenge was really migrating the customer experience, and in our case, telesales team as well, right? And
Yeah.
because no laptops, no computers, no Wi-Fi, the environment at the home is also not very conducive many a times, basically. So I think what Somil touched upon earlier, empathy helped a lot there, and also I think uh, uh, we set out the process, etc. Took out office laptops and took out office desktop, migrated all to the places of the our agents, etc. Set it up there and started experiment with that. So by the time the first 1 day lockdown had come, we realized that this is going to how it is. This is how it is going to be, and then we started working. So we had a little bit of a, I would say, lead time there, just purely because of what our CXOs felt. But I think after that also it took a lot of time to everybody really getting adjusted to that whole tech, etc. The tech was also not figured out as to how do you transfer the calls, etc., and all that. So it took a little bit of time, but I think we were able to eventually make it work. On the manager bit piece that you asked, that how have we been able to ensure that the managers have the right kind of tools and resources to hire, train, etc. I think it's still a little bit evolving, to be honest. I think we have to make some bit of progress there, etc. And I think that the real challenge has been not really about the training bit of it, but really about engaging the employees, etc., especially who have joined. Because I mean, luckily for us, and I say this with all the humility, that we did not have to let anybody go, basically. It was, I think we were able to survive this, and now we have doubled our team from the pre-pandemic levels, basically. So when you add such a large team, it becomes difficult to really percolate your culture, etc. So that has been a real challenge, basically, and we're still trying to really figure out as to how do we do that. I think in my mind, no tool can do that. It's probably just about interacting it, etc., and being probably being more open, being more available all the time to talk to them. So yeah, that is what we have been trying to do on that management piece, as in how do we groom and grow the next set of leaders, etc. But I'll be very honest, I think we're still trying to learn and understand how do we make this work in the best manner.
Perfect, Mohit. Thank you so much. I think all of us are in the same boat in that journey, and just keeping a watch an eye on the clock. Washima, a quick question for you. Okay, before we wrap up the panel discussion. Uh, so getting budgets is probably to invest in CX technology can often be a big challenge, always, right? But we know it's definitely worth it. So we have always seen the CX champions are 7 times more likely to significantly increase their CX investments in 2021, and in doing so. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yashas, I'll keep it small because I know we are going over time. But I think my 1 cent would be data. metrics, so numbers. So you have to have any investment decision. It's like when you are buying something, you also see what is the value getting out of it. Like when you buy a jeans, you're spending 5,000 or whatever amount on it, you see, will that give you the value? So when you, the same principle that when you go to your leadership, say, hey, I want to X investment, what is the value that you're giving at? And that value has to be translated into a number. You can't say that, hey, this will increase customer satisfaction, increase sales. Try to get numbers out of it, that NPS, and again I'm quoting NPS. So try to relate how will it improve your NPS, or try to relate how will it improve conversion into sales. Now these are the uber 2-3 metrics, like conversion in sales and conversion in higher customer satisfaction. Or let's say if you have vendors or seller partners, get those numbers ready. So these are your end metrics. How do you derive to those metrics? So again, I would go back to the voice of your customer program. Try to, like, this is what I have done in my past organizations when I wanted to get investments, for my initiative, is try to draw your customer lifecycle journey and the processes that you are running, identify what the pain points are, and then relate those pain points to whatever gaps in the businesses are. And then you can identify that, hey, if we launch this initiative, this is the pain that it is going to remove, and this pain can be translated into XYZ metric, and this XYZ will result into your customer satisfaction or your revenues or your seller satisfaction. So it is very critical to identify what initiative that you're planning to do, and if you can, run a pilot, try to see to show that movement. So I want to keep it short. If like it's numbers.
No, I totally agree with whatever you said, Vashma. Data is extremely important, right? And as long as you have the data to back you up with respect to the kind of investment that you're asking for, then it's always justified. Because whenever you go for it, is the first question that is asked is, what is the value? What is the return on investment on this particular initiative? And if the data is giving you that particular result, nothing like it. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, esteemed panelists. It was absolutely a pleasure interacting with each one of you, and definitely a lot of learning personally for myself. All right. Nisha, over to you.
Thank you so much. And thanks once again, everybody, for being on this call.